What if your family's safety depended not on locks or alarms, but on centuries-old methods designed long before electricity or modern weapons? For much of human history, homesteads stood as self-contained fortresses, often isolated and vulnerable to raids, bandits and hostile neighbours. Yet our ancestors developed ingenious ways of keeping danger at bay, strategies that turned ordinary homes into resilient strongholds. These defences didn't rely on heavy fortifications or city walls, but on clever design, natural barriers, community cooperation, and psychological tactics that made attacks costly and unappealing. Today, uncovering these forgotten strategies offers both a fascinating window into history and lessons that still hold relevance for those interested in resilience, preparedness, and self-reliance. The concept of a fortified home goes far beyond medieval castles or military strongholds. Ordinary farmers and settlers had to think like defenders, using their environment, tools and creativity to make sure their homestead was more trouble than it was worth to assailants. Instead of massive walls, they used resourceful barriers like ditches, thorn hedges and log stockades. Windows weren't designed for beauty, they were angled for clear fields of fire. Storage rooms doubled as safe rooms. Even the positioning of barns, wells and fences played into larger defensive plans. Modern homes rarely reflect this type of strategic design, but in earlier centuries it was standard. Settlers moving into contested frontiers in North America, for instance, often ringed their cabins with sharpened palisades and dug shallow trenches to slow intruders. In Europe, farmsteads incorporated defensive courtyards and heavy gates, while in Asia, homes were often clustered behind perimeter walls that turned entire neighbourhoods into fortified compounds. What we see today as quaint architecture was in reality part of a survival system that combined utility with defence. One of the most effective defensive strategies was not a wall of stone or wood, but one grown from the ground itself. Dense hedgerows of hawthorn, blackberry or wild roses were cultivated around property lines to create a living barrier bristling with thorns. In parts of England and Ireland, these so-called quickset hedges were nearly impossible to breach without suffering cuts and scratches, while also acting as natural fencing for livestock. In colonial America, Osage orange trees were planted in rows for the same purpose, their thorny branches weaving into an impenetrable hedge that no horse or man would willingly charge through. Water features also became strategic tools. Settlers dug shallow ponds or diverted streams to create muddy approaches that slowed attackers and funneled them into predictable paths. In some regions, homesteads were intentionally built on raised ground or surrounded by ditches that doubled as drainage, forcing anyone approaching to reveal themselves. These environmental defences blended seamlessly with daily life, disguising their true function until they were put to the test. For a modern homesteader, planting thorny barriers or shaping terrain for controlled access points can echo this ancient wisdom, blending practical landscaping with layered security. Where natural barriers weren't enough, physical structures provided additional security. Wooden palisades, rows of sharpened logs sunk into the earth, were common across Europe, North America and Asia as quick, effective defences against raiders. Some homesteads built split-rail fences with sharpened tops high enough to deter climbing. Gates were reinforced with crossbars and often positioned to force entrance into narrow choke points, where defenders could more easily control the encounter. Even simple earthworks served a defensive role. Mounds of dirt piled against outer walls absorbed arrows or musket fire, while shallow trenches around the perimeter slowed attackers and exposed them to counterfire. These methods required labour but little expense, relying on muscle and determination rather than imported stone or iron. A well-placed barrier could mean the difference between a raider moving on to an easier target or persisting in an assault. In today's world, while such structures may seem outdated, the principle of controlled entry points and layered perimeters still underpins effective homestead and property security. Defences were not just about slowing attackers, but also about knowing when they were coming. Early warning systems played a crucial role in homestead security. Dogs were the most widespread, chosen not just for loyalty but for their keen hearing and instinctive alarm calls. Geese were another surprisingly effective choice, their loud honking making them natural sentries that often alerted families to strangers before dogs did. Mechanical warning systems also existed. Simple tripwires rigged with bells, rattles or even clattering pots announced movement around the perimeter. In some cases, floors or gates were designed to creak loudly when disturbed, giving away an intruder's approach. For more direct defence, homes incorporated, murder holes, small openings above doors or gates where defenders could drop stones, boiling water or hot sand on anyone forcing an entry. Windows were narrow, placed high, and angled for both light and defensive use, allowing residents to fire out without exposing themselves. These were not paranoid measures, but practical necessities in unsettled times. For those interested in preparedness today, similar principles apply. Layered awareness, redundancy in alarms, and the ability to defend key access points without overexposing oneself. No homestead was an island. One of the strongest forms of defence came not from physical barriers, but from community ties. In frontier settlements, watch rotations were common, with neighbours keeping lookout for one another during vulnerable times. Signal systems, such as horn blasts, drum beats or fire beacons, alerted entire villages when danger approached. In medieval Europe, hue and cry laws required all able-bodied men to pursue intruders once an alarm was raised, making individual attacks far riskier for would-be raiders. These networks extended beyond immediate defence. Families stored supplies communally, shared fortified barns, or even constructed blockhouses that could shelter multiple households in times of siege. Mutual defence pacts ensured that a threat to one homestead was treated as a threat to all. The principle remains relevant. Strong communities, whether rural or urban, provide more security than isolation. Modern neighbourhood watch programs, radio communication systems, and cooperative land management echo the survival strategies of earlier centuries. Not all defences were physical. Many relied on perception, reputation, and psychological deterrence. A homestead that looked well defended often never needed to fight. Farmers sometimes staged false vulnerabilities, leaving items visible to lure intruders into controlled traps. Others spread rumours of hidden weapon stockpiles, fierce defenders or deadly traps, discouraging would-be attackers from testing their luck. Maintaining a reputation for toughness mattered as much as actual defences. In frontier towns, families who had successfully repelled raiders in the past were less likely to be targeted again. Even symbolic markers like skulls of predators nailed to fence posts or weapon racks visible through open doors served as warnings. The unseen shield of deterrence saved countless homesteads from actual violence because the risk of attack simply wasn't worth it. For modern times, this translates to the principle of visible readiness. Clear signs that a home or community is vigilant and not an easy target. The strategies that once shielded homesteads may seem relics of the past, yet the principles they embody are timeless. Use of the environment, layered barriers, early warnings, strong communities, psychological deterrence and resourcefulness under pressure remain the bedrock of resilience. Modern technology may offer cameras and alarms, but without the underlying mindset of adaptability and vigilance, those tools mean little. For homesteaders, survivalists or history enthusiasts, studying these forgotten defences connects us to the lived experience of those who endured in uncertain times. More importantly, it equips us with lessons that can be reshaped for our own age of instability, whether for off-grid living, disaster preparedness, or simply understanding the ingenuity of those who came before us. History shows us that strength was never just about weapons or walls. It was about creativity, cooperation, and the will to endure. The 7 forgotten defensive strategies that shielded homesteads reveal a world where survival demanded more than strength. It demanded ingenuity. From thorn hedges to tripwires, from community watch to psychological warfare, these methods turned vulnerable households into fortified sanctuaries. They remind us that resilience begins not with resources, but with mindset, and that the past still holds tools for our future. If you value uncovering these hidden lessons from history, take the time to subscribe to In the Beginning. Share this with fellow history enthusiasts and survivalists who understand that forgotten wisdom is often the key to true resilience. By keeping these lessons alive, we not only honor our ancestors' ingenuity but also prepare ourselves for challenges yet to come.